Hey guys, welcome to another video. So today I've got a very special video for you because I heard from some of you guys that you're really interested in audiobooks and how to do them. So I've done previous videos on that. Links will be in the description below. So today, in the previous example, I used my book Hunter because I had issues with it, so it was delayed in comparison to getting the other audiobooks for the rest of the Valiant series done, and I finally got around to doing it. So I went over the starting process and how it works. So I had to wait a little while for the auditions to come in. So auditions came in, and at the time I was still conflicted because I was debating between two really good ones, and I wasn't sure if my choice was going to be solid until after the 15-minute sample from the narrator. And then so I didn't actually film my initial thing when I first accepted my narrator. I made an offer to the narrator, so I didn't get that portion. So when you accept a narrator, you send them an offer, and then there's this little form you have to fill out. I did not, unfortunately, get that form, but I will try to remember what you select in the form, so that way we can still kind of help you guys out with this process. But the video is all about how to choose the right narrator. So let's get right into it. So when you do have your audiobook up, you probably won't have a cover yet, but your information will be here, how long it is and that sort of thing. Your deadline that you included in the last video, which I think I went over, will be here. So as your auditions come in, they will pop up here. Now, you may or may not get auditions. I've had this be completely random with all of my books. So with Samurai, I got like 2 auditions in like 2 weeks. I had to go and seek people out, and then eventually I got a few more and found somebody that I liked specifically. But I had to request auditions, which is basically where you go and you search for narrators, which I will go over that process as well. But I've had other instances where the audition, like in Hunter, I put it up, and within I had 12 auditions. It says 11 because auditions are closed and I chose a narrator. So these are basically everything else other than the main one that I chose. I did get permission from these narrators to use their samples in this video so that we can go over what sounds good, what doesn't, and basically help you guys understand exactly what you're looking for and how to choose the right narrator. So let's get right into it, which I already said that. So obviously, I've mentioned this in a few of my other videos. Quality, quality, quality. Audio quality is key. You want to get an audition and a narrator that has a very cool, crisp, clean, professional sound. And I will actually play a few here and let you hear the difference in the audio quality. Now, keep in mind that disclaimer here, I appreciate every single person who auditioned for Hunter, and I really appreciated all of your auditions, and there's usually at least one thing or maybe more than one thing that I really enjoyed about all of these auditions. The narrator that I chose simply because everything was the right fit, and I'll go over my exact reasons why I chose the narrator that I did. I also have a list of the people that I have permission from in here, so that way I can keep track of everything. So first off, we have John Schindler. And for me, and this is not necessarily an actual tip for you guys to follow, but my personal OCD, I pay more attention to narrators who take the time to send me a message with it. So you'll have the audition here. You can play it. You can send them a message. You can download the audition. And it has their name here. So if they send me a message, I'm more than likely to pay attention to them because they took the effort to talk to me. I appreciate the effort. And sometimes they talk about, like, I can certainly do the whole book, but I'd be willing to do a female voice. So, like, I like hearing from them specifically because I want a narrator who's willing to talk with me and communicate with me clearly, as opposed to somebody who's not. Now, that's not to say that this person is not a good narrator, but it's just I prefer when the narrators do send me a message. So anytime you get a narration, even if you listen to it, you can click on their name, and I right click and open up a new tab, and it pulls up their profile. So you get their picture, you get their name, and then they have audiobook samples that they have put up from other random things, so you can kind of hear different styles and stuff. You can look at their credits, you can look at what they want to do. So this John is royalty share plus, which is good because that's exactly what we're looking for. And so let's just listen to a little bit of it, and keep in mind that everybody's doing the same audition. So I've had to listen to the opening of Hunter 12 times because 11 plus the guy that I chose. 12 times. So you will probably get very annoyed. If you're like me, I'm so annoyed with the opening of Hunter, I could quote it in my sleep at this point. So let's listen to a bit and we'll talk about the audition here.
Jared. The whip flashed once as it snapped out and lashed my target across the back.
So immediately you can hear cool, crisp, professional audio. It's not soft, there's no static, there's no background noise, it's just a very professional sounding. So immediately you can pick up on the audio quality of a narration of an audition, and the audio quality itself is top tier for me. So let's keep listening.
My lips slid up into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down. I slipped the whip back in its place on my belt and looked back up.
So the next thing you want to listen for is whether they read naturally or whether they sound stilted, or the Shatner effect is what I call the Shatner effect. So it's like that where you speak and you stop and there's several pauses in between your speech. Now those pauses may not be as exaggerated as I did, but I call it the William Shatner effect because it's just like really, and it doesn't sound natural at all. You want it to sound like they're naturally talking like I am to you now. Not that I'm reading anything, but like take, for instance, me reading his message. This sounds like a neat project. If you like how I sound, I can certainly do the whole book. That sounds natural, not like, you know, it's really hard to explain when it sounds stilted, but it's like, this sounds like a neat project. Like I'm reading the message and it doesn't sound as natural as if it does if a normal person is talking. When you're that turns readers off, especially. It'll turn listeners off. You want somebody who sounds natural. And I hate to say it, but, and this is kind of, again, one of those minor things, the person's voice has to kind of have a certain appeal to it because, like, for me, I want to listen to somebody who sounds appealing, I guess. And it's kind of like a minor thing. And so it's kind of like judging a book by its cover, which we shouldn't do, but we all do anyway because a book cover matters, which honestly sucks and I hate it. But, for me, I prefer soothing voices, and I think for every reader, for every listener, it's different. So it depends on like what the reader, and you can't predict what your listeners are going to want to listen to, but you can just pick out what sounds soothing to you. And so a general rule of thumb is that if it sounds grating to you, or if there's something that grates on you when you listen to it, then generally it's not going to be a fit for you or for your book. And all of this, I say again, highest amount of respect to everybody who auditioned, and I'm just trying to give the exact like help and advice that is going to help other authors pick out the narrators for their book. So again, cool, crisp sound. The other thing you want to do is obviously for your characterization in your book. So what kind of sound do you want for your narrator, for your book, based on your genre and based on your main characters and the narrator that you want? That's the key things that you want to look for. So in my case, I'm looking for Jared and I'm looking for Avarella. Jared's in the beginning. Now my book has a very serious tone.
Novarch had his sword already unsheathed and was holding it against the man's throat. The man glared up at us as he leaned on his arms for support on the
So he emphasizes words. There's a little bit of emotion. It's not as heavy-handed or serious as I would like, but those are minor things that can be tweaked once you actually start working with your narrator. Then you can tell them, hey, a little bit of emotion here. You know, you need more of this, more of that. That's all fixed in the revision process. So again, but the main thing for me is quality sound. So that's why John was immediately one of my top choices, because it was a cool, crisp, very clean audio. He had the right he has the right male voice that I'm looking for, and the right tone. So let's look at another audition. This is Kenneth Ostrom, and I want to shout this guy out because Kenneth has auditioned for I'm pretty sure every single Valiant book that I've had up here, and he keeps getting passed over, and I feel bad, but he's so good, and he puts in a lot of effort and time and effort into his auditions, which I do appreciate. And the main issue that I have in this one is the quality, so immediately you'll be able to hear the difference.
The man glared at us as he leaned on his arms for support on the dry, cracked earth.
So you can hear the difference between his, let's see, that's at 29 seconds, so let's go to 20.
The sword already unsheathed and was...
Okay.
Sweat covered his body, along with thick patches of dirt and grime.
So you can hear the difference in audio quality between the two.
Holding it against the man's throat.
Loud, crisp, easy to listen to. This one's soft, very hard to hear, and I generally have to turn my volume up when I listen to it. The other thing is sometimes the readability doesn't sound as natural, which again is kind of a minor thing. It's not really that big of a deal. The main difference here is the audio quality. And then for me, it's the characterization. The voice age does not sound as young as I would like it to be, which again is something that you have to look for in your narrator. How old are your characters? What do you want the voice to sound like? When I did Samurai, I had an older woman and I didn't realize that her voice was going to sound way too old for my characters that are in their 20s. That may or may not matter to you as much. But anyways, that may or may not matter to you as much, but it's a deal. It's something that matters to me, just not as much as the audio quality.
Your name? Hinda, our second in command, demand.
So that was a weird voice for Hinda. We're going back to the characterization of the things. Now, I would not suggest rejecting a narrator only because they're not characterizing your characters correctly. That can be fixed in when you accept and send an offer to your narrator. You can tell them, hey, this character is supposed to have this kind of voice, and you can work with them on how it sounds. The perfect example of this is the woman, the narrator that I ended up working with for Shifter. Her original audition, she did an Irish accent, and Barone is Native American, not Irish. And I didn't reject her. I accepted her after we talked, and she said that she can work on a Native American accent, and we actually worked out an accent that works very well for Barone and Shifter, and she's my narrator now. So her characterization was incorrect, but in working with her, I have worked with her. There's a moth on my ceiling. But in working with her, I have worked with her and we've managed to fix the characterization. So yeah, Hinda's a little weird, but remember, these are the auditions and there's probably very, very little direction that you've given them. So they're just going based off of what they read and how they feel when they're doing the audition. And so don't reject a narrator strictly because of the characterization not being what you had in your head. Again, Hinda's supposed to be deep, he's supposed to be menacing and intimidating, and that kind of sounded weak and feeble and kind of weird and old. But again, that would be, if I did decide to go forward with Kenneth, that would be something, hey, he's supposed to sound deep and menacing, so scare me when he talks. And that would be a direction that I would have given him personally if I had accepted. But again, the audio quality was another reason why Kenneth was not a narrator that I would have chosen. So the next one we have to look at is Eric Carson.
Hunter. Valiant, Book 1, by Joanna White.
So immediately we hear the audio quality is still up to par, like with John Schindler. I'm sorry, I'm butchering your name. And it's cool, crisp, and it's loud. I can hear it. It's very clean.
Narrated by Eric Carson. Chapter 1. Jared.
So if you hear the inflation in his voice, Chapter 1, it's very, very positive. It is very, very light, and it's the complete wrong tone for my book. Hunter is very serious. It's very dark almost, not in a bad way. And so his voice has a natural light and cheer to it, which is great, and that's fine. Some narrators have a particular style over another, just like how writers have different styles as well. And so it's way too cheery for Hunter, and so immediately that stands out to me, and my mind is immediately thought that this would be better for Rogue, because Rogue is meant to be a comedy fantasy.
The whip flashed once as it snapped out and lashed my target across the back.
So the other thing that I like that Eric did was he emphasized certain words and kind of emphasizes the emotion. Now, this may not be as important to you, but for me personally, a narrator who can include the emotion in a scene is so important for me. It really gets me into and pulls me into the scene and brings it to life. And I want a narrator who can bring my book to life. And so the emotion behind the scenes is what I really like about Eric Carson's. And that's another thing that Kenneth does kind of well at some points too, is he gets really enthusiastic and really gets into some of the words.
Gabriel, the man hissed. Age. Hinda snared down at the prisoner. 24. The man glared up at Hinda. As he spoke, hatred blazed from his...
Yeah, the hatred blazed, like that word blazed, the emphasizing certain words to have the emotion behind it, really good.
My lips slid into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down. I slipped the whip back into its place.
Again, very lighthearted, very positive. Sometimes to me it doesn't sound as natural as I would like, but other than that, it was good. It just wasn't one of my top ones because of the tone, and it just didn't fit the Hunter's tone. Now, again, that could have been something that if you accept your narrator, they can fix the tone, and that's where you would probably click on their profile, check them out, and see if they have the melodramatic, velvety. So those tones might have been a little different in some of his auditions and stuff, but you know, I made the decision that I made for the reasons that I made it. So the other thing that you want to look at is what they're offering. And so like this person, Samuel Isaacson, shout out to him. Shout out to everybody I'm including in this video, but Samuel mentioned that he works with a female. So this immediately jumped out to me because, oh, I can have the female do Avarella's parts and the male do Jared's parts. So that jumped out at me, but the key was that she works for per finished hour. And so I had to private message him and talk for a while to see if he was willing to do royalty share. He was, but she wasn't. And so that kind of broke the female deal for me, which kind of like stopped the whole thing, because again, at the time we were expecting the female part, so he did Avarella's part, but it wasn't as there wasn't any characterization. He just read it like a male narrator, and so that kind of shot down that idea. But let's listen to his.
Hunter, Valiant Book 1, The Valiant Series 1, written by Joanna White, narrated by Samuel Isaacson and Erica Annette.
You can immediately tell he's a professional. And the reason why is because it sounds natural. It has that deep audiobook reading tone that I often want from a male narrator. And it just has that smooth sound and tone and feel to it that comes from a professional. It's really hard to put into words what the difference is. And then the other thing is the sound is immediately professional. It's cool, crisp, it's loud. You can hear it just fine. But listen to how he does this.
Chapter 1. Jared. The whip flashed once as it snapped out and lashed my target across the back. My lips slid up into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down.
I love the way it sounds. It's very fit for the tone. It's very serious. Sometimes it gets a little, not flat, it's the wrong word, like the tone kind of stays repetitive, I guess. And so sometimes you need a little bit of more emotion into it, so it sounds a little bit emotionless, but it is from Jared's perspective. So sometimes it does sound a little emotionless, but, it's from Jared's perspective, so that's understandable. So the main reason why I didn't choose, he was another second choice on top of John and the person that I did choose, again, because of the professional quality and how you can tell that he's a professional audio narrator. It sounds very professional to me.
I slipped the whip back in its place on my belt and looked up. Nope.
Yeah. So sometimes his accent has a little bit, sometimes he has a little bit of an accent there, and sometimes it sounds a little bit plain. But other than that, that's like a complete professional sounding recording. So next up is Rosalind. Now, she didn't send a message, so that kind of jumped out at me. Like the other narrator's hat, and the other thing is that she's a female, and I opened it up to both because I didn't have a preference. I'm open to both. I did have a preference, and I wanted a male narrator. My preference actually would have been both, but with royalty share you'd have to get a studio like this that's willing to do both. But I was open to a female narrator if I got a female narrator that just nailed it and blew me out of the water, and I ended up choosing a guy narrator that basically did the same thing. So let's listen to hers.
Chapter 1, Jared.
Again, immediately, the quality is not up to par with what I would want it to be. It's hard to hear. It's got that lower, that softer sound to it, and it kind of sounds like there's a little, not really an echo, but it just sounds like it's not as
The whip flashed once,
professional.
snapped out and lashed my target across the back. My lips.
It's like softer and a little bit more, I don't want to say echoey, but it kind of has that feel to it that's just not as professional as, so listen to the difference here.
Slid up into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down.
Ovark had his sword already unsheathed.
Do you hear the difference in the sound there? I hope you do, because I can't put it into words. I'm a writer and I have no words for this. So immediately the audio quality was a big turnoff for me. And then the other thing is, I hate to say it, but her voice was way too light and way too high pitched for a serious book like Hunter. So again, like the other character, now the other guy, Eric, was his tone was lighthearted and fun, which was a better fit for Rogue. Hers was a little bit too high pitched and too airy and like cheery for the tone of the book. But she did do a good
I
job.
slipped the whip back in its place on my belt and looked back up. Novarch had his sword already unsheathed and was holding it against the man's throat. The man glared up at us.
She does sound natural when she is reading. It's just a little too high pitched and airy and like lighthearted. And the audio quality is again the main reason why I turned this one down, because of the audio quality, but it's still kind of too lighthearted for Hunter. So another thing is that I wanted to point out, if you have a narrator who pronounces a word wrong in your audition, let it go, because as soon as you make the offer and you find a narrator and they accept, you will be sending them the manuscript, and I'm assuming you will make them a pronunciation guide, which is everything in your book that needs to be pronounced. You write out how everything is supposed to be pronounced, including you give them also a character guide, so how to pronounce the character's name and like how you envision that character to sound and like how they're supposed to portray that character. That's the first thing that you send them. And so like she pronounced him, she said Norvark's name wrong or different, and so that would have been something that would have been corrected in the next stage. So don't let that be a factor into it. The main thing is audio quality, and just if they sound like they're reading naturally, and if the tone is a good fit for your book, unless they can change the tone. So I'm skipping some of these because I didn't get permission from certain people. So next up we have Pierre Bastit-Bacote. I am so sorry I butchered your name. So this one didn't have a message either. So again, that's kind of a little thing that just if they send me a message, it's kind of nice.
Hunters, Valiant, Book 1, The Valiant Series 1. Written by Joanna White. Performed by Pierre Baptiste-Bacote.
Pierre Baptiste-Bacote. Okay. So a couple things to note here. The audio quality here is not great, but it's not bad. It's not on the level of Rachel. And so I would say Rachel's and Kenneth's would be the lower tier. And then I would say Pierre would be middle tier. And then I would say that John and Samuel would be the top tier. Just in terms of the audio quality from the ones that we've listened to. And another thing to note is that you can kind of tell sometimes who's got experience and who doesn't. It doesn't mean that the people who don't do this are unprofessional, but it kind of sets them apart a little bit for me, is if they introduce it and read it like a regular narration, where they have the opening credits, because it's like they've had experience with audiobooks, so they automatically put the credits in there. So Hunter, Joanna White, written by Joanna White, narrated by whoever, you can kind of tell that they have a little bit of experience with that. So let's keep listening.
Chapter 1. Jared. The whip flashed once as it snapped out and lashed my target across the back. My lips slid up into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down.
So Pierre includes a lot of emotion and kind of action into his narration, which is actually a good thing, but it also kind of gets overdone. And so you really want a narrator who is going to have that balance where it's not too much, but it's not too little and completely flat either. And I think that's the huge difference, because the difference in Pierre's versus Samuel's is super professional and he sounds natural, but there's kind of like just no emotion to his tone whatsoever, which sometimes happens when you get these really good professionals, is that their job is to read the book, and sometimes the professionals, it's like they're letting the writing kind of speak for itself and they don't put emotion into it, if that makes sense. That's not to say all professionals are like that, and that's just, it's kind of like a personal thing, a personal preference for the narrators, but...
And was holding it against the man's throat. The man glared up at us as he leaned on his arm for support on the dry, cracked earth.
Now that's very flat. Compare that to this.
I slipped the whip back in its place on my belt and looked back up. Novarek had his sword already unsheathed and was holding it against the man's throat.
Pierre has a very, very dramatic tone, which is, again, a good thing because you want to have a little bit of dramatic, but it can get over the top sometimes. And again, the audio quality here is kind of middle tier. So those are the two things that stood out. Another thing, you still want to think about characterization, which some narrators can fix and adjust, like the one with Shifter did, like mine for Shifter did. So that's not to, don't be overly picky, but his voice is a little bit more higher pitched because I imagined Jared and some of my other guy characters, there's a lot of male characters. There's only one female character in the book primarily, and that's Avarella. The rest are all these guys who are very deep, very intimidating, and I imagined a lot of deep bass voices, so I'm looking for a very deep kind of voice, and it's not anything bad with the narrator because, you know, they have the kind of voice that they have. I don't have a very high-pitched pretty voice, so if I was auditioning up against somebody like Rosalind,
Sword already unsheathed and was holding it against the
her
man's
voice is very light and airy, so I would kind of fail in that because I have a deeper tone for a female. And so it kind of just depends on your personal preference and your characterization and what you're looking for. And again, that's not to say that a narrator couldn't up their voice and make it higher pitched, or that a male narrator couldn't deepen their voice down to make it more, you know, deep and resonating. But that is a factor that played into it for me. And so with that and the middle tier audio, and that's kind of one of the couple reasons why I didn't choose Pierre's, because in this book, a lot of male characters, a lot of deep bass voices, and he has this kind of tenor voice that's just not fit for
The man glared up at us.
what I was looking for. So next we're on to Scott Lacote. Oh, real quick, I wanted to shout out Pierre. So this is his profile, and I will have a link to this in the description below. And so again, with each of these, he's got a lot of audition samples on his thing with different kind of stuff. So engaging, announcer, storyteller, articulate. So he can kind of change his tone a lot, which is probably would have been adjusted. But again, with the audio quality, I chose somebody who I thought was the best, which we're going to get to very last. So stick with me till the end of this video because you don't want to miss who I chose. So shout out to Pierre. I'm not going to try to say her name again because I don't want to butcher it again. But next we're on to Scott. So again, nice little message. I kind of like it. So they look forward to working with me in the future. So it kind of sweet, makes me feel good. All right.
Hunter. Valiant Book 1. The Valiant Series 1. Written by Joanna White. Narrated by Scott Lacote.
Okay, so first of all, the audio quality. While he's loud and you can hear him, unlike with Kenneth, who is very, very soft, his still has that lower quality audio. And I don't know how to pinpoint it because it just sounds lower quality compared to some of the other ones. So let's listen again.
Chapter 1. Jared.
Hear that kind of like echo compared to...
Sweat covered his body, along with thick...
See how cool and crisp that is? I can't describe the low quality, but it's just got that lower quality kind of echoey sound to it that I don't like, and that's kind of unprofessional. So you want something that's cool and crisp. But the audio quality was one thing about this one, and I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here because I just said that Pierre's was not bass enough for me in the voice. Scott's voice was almost too low for me, and so I'm sounding a little bit picky, but these are kind of some things that you have to pick out, and this is all under the category of characterization. These are auditions, so you have to go at this listening to each one with the idea of, okay, what do I want my character to sound like? And again, don't be too picky, like perhaps I was, because a lot of times you can work with the narrator and they're willing or able to change their voice to fix the character, to fix it to sound one way or another. But do keep in mind what you want the characters to sound like.
The whip flashed once as it snapped out and lashed my target across the back. My lips slid up into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down. I slipped the whip back in its place on my belt and looked back up.
So he also has this kind of snarky tone to him that was not quite what I was looking for. They are snarky and evil sometimes, but at this point in the book it was meant to be more serious, but those are notes that still could have been talked with and discussed in the production stage. One thing that I do is I really want to find a narrator that is as close to perfect as I can get, because I am personally, after some of my experiences in the past, I do not want to get myself into a contract or a situation where I have to work with somebody and count on them changing themselves for my book. I'd rather find somebody who's already fit for my book. Now, that's not to say that you can't change, that a narrator won't change themselves or their voice to fit your book. As I said, my narrator for Shifter changed her accent around to fit Barone's character, and that worked out great. And she's been working with me so well. So do not take this as like a all exclusive situation. But for me personally, that is another thing that I think of is I want, rather than have to go through extra steps to fix something, if you do happen to find a narrator who is perfect and fits all the boxes for you, then choose them rather than somebody else who would have to jump rather than choosing somebody who would have to jump through hoops just to fit your book and what you're wanting. That would also be less work on the other person as well. So we have one more narrator left, and that's Timothy, and then I'll get to the person I chose and why. But one last tip is, as I was listening to all these auditions, there was one voice that kept coming back to me. I listened to the audition, and this voice stayed with me, and I could hear it in my head. So when I would listen to some of the other narrators, I was like, I missed that other voice. And so it's kind of like when you're in love, and how to figure out if you're in love or not, is if you separate from each other and you miss them, 10 to 1 you love them or care about them very deeply. And that's how I saw and made my decision for the narrator with Hunter, was that as I was listening to auditions and auditions and auditions, I missed one narrator's voice, and that's the one that I ran back to and decided, all right, then if I'm missing it, then this is probably the voice for me. So let's listen to Timothy's.
Chapter 1. Jared. The whip flashed once as it snapped out and lashed my target across the back.
Another minor tip here. So first, okay, let me start. I'm getting ahead of myself. First of all, he has a deep tone. His tone, perfect for Hunter. So remember what I talked about just a few minutes ago. He, rather than trying to force somebody else to jump through hoops to fit your characterization, if you can find somebody who's perfect right off the bat, then 10 to 1 they're going to be more than likely a good choice for you. Now that's not to say you should be picky and like, oh well, there's one thing wrong so I can't choose them, I need somebody who's perfect. No, you may not find somebody who's perfect. As I said, I worked with my narrator Megan, and she changed her tone to fit Shifter just fine. But if you do find somebody who's perfect, then 10 to 1 they're going to be the narrator that you choose. So if you can find somebody who's a perfect fit for your characters, then 10 to 1 they're going to be somebody that should be higher on your list.
My lips slid into a devious smile. It was hard enough to knock him down. I slipped the whip back in its place on my belt and looked back up.
So the one critique that I had about Timothy's was that it sometimes had that stilted sound to it that didn't sound as natural reading, but that was something that I had talked to him about that we could fix in the actual book, so that was one thing. But the audio quality was also top tier, just like the other ones that we discussed, Samuel and John. So they were my top 3 choices simply because the audio quality and the tone of voice was exactly what I was looking for, which seemed to be the factors that were important to me with Hunter. So if you get later on into the audition, when we're at Averella's perspective,
or vegetables from us. They would pay us with what we didn't have. Find him. Just because I'm sick doesn't mean I have to lie in bed all day.
So he did include just a little bit of emotion where it was necessary in the audition, but he wasn't like over the top or overly dramatic. It was just the right amount to be emotional as a listener. And the other factor that I appreciated was, for me, I had a situation with Averella because she disguises herself as a man. So she's a woman who's disguising herself as a man. So when she's disguised as a man, she deepens her voice to sound like a male. And I needed the narrator, whether they were male or female, to be able to have a female kind of lighter voice for her when she's normal, and then to deepen that same voice so that it sounds like a man but still sounds like Averella. And that was my main thing. So at the end of the scene, which is Averella's scene, I added on just a single line from her male alter ego called Dalix, just to see if they could sound like a man. And what Timothy did was he actually left me a note at the end of his audition where he spoke to me directly in the audition and told me his strategy and thought process behind the voice. So how he sounded, he made his voice sound light and airy for Averella. Since he is a man with a deep voice, he had to do that. And then he just deepened it to sound more like a fake man voice. And the inspiration for that came from Mulan, like she did when she fakely deepens her voice. And he felt like it was more important for readers to pick out that this is Averella acting like a man rather than to be more realistic and actually sound like a man. And I loved that, and it really hit with me hard. And that was the main thing why I chose him. One of the main things why I chose him over Samuel was because Samuel just kind of like read Averella's, and Timothy put in the extra work for thinking deeply about his characterization of Averella's voice, and he put a lot of thought process into her voice. And that's the main reason why I chose Timothy. The other reason, as I said, was that when I was listening to he was the first one to audition, or the second one to audition. And as I was listening to all these other auditions, I had to wait 2 weeks for all of these to come in, at least a week or two for all of these to come in. And I was listening to them, I kept thinking about his voice, and I kept missing his voice. And it was like, again, like, you know, two people in love, and you separate for a while, and you realize that you miss them. 10 to 1, you care about them. And it's the same concept. It's, you know, I felt like, okay, he's meant to be my narrator. If I keep missing his voice, then I don't want to choose a narrator and then end up regretting my decision because I didn't choose Timothy, the one I really wanted deep inside. And that's why I went with Timothy. So how to choose your narrator for your audiobook. Audio quality is the main thing you want to look for. Does it sound good? Does it cool, crisp, smooth? Is it loud enough to be heard? Does it have an echo sound? Are there background noises in the background? None of these people had background sounds. They were all professionally recorded. Just some of them, the audio quality was lower than what I was expecting or wanting or looking for. The next thing is the overall tone of your book and the overall expectations that you have from a narrator. Do you want a male? Do you want a female narrator? Do you want a female with a higher voice or a mid-ranged voice? Do you want a male narrator with a higher voice or a low-ranged voice? So the tone, the volume, the pitch of the narrator's voice, the age range. Do you need an older narrator or a younger sounding one or a middle-aged one? Those are all the main factors because age cannot be changed. Their audio quality 10 to 1 is not going to be changed or adjusted at this time. So those are the audio quality, and then their age, the age range that you're looking for from an audio narrator. And then their pitch, which can be changed, but some narrators may not be able to do that. It just depends on the talent of the narrator that you're talking to. And then are they going to communicate with you? That's another key. Do they communicate with you clearly? Are they willing to work with you and take your advice and your suggestions and actually change some of how they're reading it in order to fit your book and to make adjustments when needed? Because as you read your book, you're not going to be able to get everything into this audition. So you're going to come across things that maybe you have a really suspenseful part of your book and you really want them to nail the suspense. And is your narrator willing to work at that and to continue working at it so that it gets up to par with what you're looking for? So some of those are the factors that you want to look into when choosing your narrator. And the big one, I cannot emphasize enough, audio quality. You want the audio quality of the recordings to be professional, because if it's not, then it's going to get blamed on you, the author, for hiring a narrator who's not as professional, and for the book not sounding as professional, and that will come across in the reviews. So especially if you're doing royalty share, you want the book to be professional, because any readers buying this audiobook is what's going to pay you and what's going to pay this narrator. So you and your narrator both want to make the best quality book that you can. So when you do choose the narrator that you want, and again, I'm going to shout out Timothy here because I am so excited to work with Timothy. So he's got a lot of ones. So you can tell by do they have a website, their experience that they have. He was willing to do it for royalty share for me. How many samples do they have? Kind of gives you an indication of their range and the experience that they have. And he was actually that just check mark means it's like official audio from Audible or something like that. But anyway, so send a message, download audition. When I have already accepted him and sent him an offer, so this so this third option is not going to appear. But if you have not accepted or sent an offer, a third option will appear here that says send offer. When you have decided to choose somebody, click that button and it will take you to the form that you're supposed to fill out. I don't recommend you send it to anybody right off the bat. What you want to do is you want to send them a message and talk to them first. Get into some dialogue, mention, hey, I really liked your audition, thank them for auditioning, and then mention maybe anything that you have concerns over, anything that you want to make sure to communicate with them before you get into a 7-year contract with them, because this is very serious. It will be a 7-year contract, so you really want to make sure that everything's squared away. So one thing that I mentioned to Timothy was about making sure it reads and sounds natural. And again, after this, I'll mention this in my next video about this, that you have a 15-minute sample that they do send you, and that's the last time you can accept or reject your narrator, basically. So that's also there for you if you get into, like when I did with Samurai, I did no auditions and I went straight into that 15-minute sample, which told me, okay, her voice is way too old for this. I need to find somebody else. And I was able to cancel it and find somebody else that's perfect for it. So once you choose that option, offer, it will pop up here and you will have to fill out some information. So it will ask you if you want to be exclusive to Audible or non-exclusive, and if you're doing, and whether you want to do royalty share or paid per finished hour, or royalty share plus. And if you are doing royalty share, you have to be exclusive to ACX. You cannot sell it anywhere else. So again, you choose whether you want to be exclusive or non-exclusive, and whether you're doing pay per finished hour or royalty share. Just click all those options and fill out the information there, and then you click send or complete or whatever it is, and it will send that offer to your narrator, and then you'll have to wait for them to accept or reject your offer. So after they accept or reject your offer, then you move on to the next part of the stage of making an audiobook. If they do accept your offer, then you will move on to the third stage of making an audiobook, which is for another video at another time. So thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to like this video if it helped you, and be sure to subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday. And if you'd like to know the first part of making an audiobook, then click this video here.